Representative Mitchell, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing swimmingly, sir. You and I kind of met, but didn't really meet at an election summit over the summer, last summer. Idaho has a very, very lockdown election system, which is fantastic. It hasn't always been that way. But in spite of that, people have bad sentiment towards elections in general, especially after 2020. There were a lot of people that were very frustrated with our election system. And the election system in Idaho was not suffering from the problems that people were seeing nationwide. And you, in fact, are one of the reasons why our election system is so robust and so solid as it was. So that's kind of what got you into the legislature. So walk me back and explain to me what drove you to address this problem and what the actual problem was.
So the first year that I ran for election, I got looking at our election laws, and our election laws were really loose for same-day registration. Same-day registration allowed you to register with anything with a picture ID on it and anything with your address. So technically, I could go in and register with a scuba diving card and an Amazon box, which I didn't think that was okay because it doesn't really lock me into where I'm at. I mean, I could ship an Amazon box to you, know where it's going to or when it's going to land. I can take your address and vote from your address. And so I really had a hard time with that. And so that was one of the focuses that I did on the election integrity side of things. So we got into when I got into office, I won that election, got into office, and that's what I started focusing on is let's fix that side of things. And we really kind of struggled getting it fixed, but in 2023, we actually tied that all down, locked it all down. We at the same time, we got rid of student IDs, so you can't use student ID at the poll. You can't use it to register. So we locked it down to where if you've got an Idaho driver's license or an Idaho concealed carry permit, or a government issued ID, so kind of like the tribes have their own cards and stuff, as long as they've got an address on it, that's all you really need. If they don't, then you can bring in a social security or not a social security, but a passport.
Sure.
But you have to bring something with your address because a passport, you're just writing your address in the back of it. It doesn't print it in there. So you can change it whenever you move. So that's what the new law came out in 2023, where we locked all that down to make sure that you're actually verifying you are who you are, you live where you're living, so that you're voting in the right precinct and making sure that your vote's going to be counted and it's not going to offset somebody else's legal vote.
When you guys started addressing all of these things, what did you find out? Was there any information that came forward? You're like, oh, we've been like, there are 20,000 people voting with like an Amazon box or something like that. What was the percentage of people that were actually engaging in like non-government IDs or out-of-state IDs? Because for instance, you can't vote in Idaho right now with a California driver's license. You have to get an Idaho driver's license, concealed carry, or some kind of federal identification, like I have a passport card, something of that nature. You can't bring a Washington ID. You can't bring a California ID, even if you have like, your, like say I have an Idaho Power, bill, invoice. What is it? Electricity bill. Yeah, there it is. Anyway, so I have to bring, even if I have that with my name and address on it, I still have to bring an Idaho issued ID or something similar.
Right. Except for like I said, on the passport, you're allowed the passport, and then we allow for like an electric bill or something.
Yeah.
Something that ties you to that house.
Yes.
We did exclude cell phone bills because cell phone bills they can move all over the place. They're not tying you to a house. We didn't have a whole lot of data at that point, but when we started passing this, we started hearing some rumblings from some of the other counties. We found like 52 of them that shouldn't have been voting here and that type of stuff. So we didn't really lock down a whole lot before we ran the bill, but when we were getting that bill through and starting to change our laws and locking them down, that's when we started hearing rumblings of here and there. So having actual numbers, I don't know what the actual numbers are. But I know that one of my biggest concerns was, like I said, an Amazon box and a scuba diving card is not okay.
Yeah.
The other thing that I did during that time was I really wanted to focus on the driver's license and citizenship. So we made it, the first year we made it so that it was optional that you can have the USA designation put on your driver's license if you're a U.S. citizen. And then the next year when we actually passed that bill, we actually require it now. So when you go in and get your new driver's license, it's actually going to say U.S. citizen on there or USA on there if you're a U.S. citizen.
And there is verification through ITD that is accurate, correct?
Yep, because you have to verify that when you go in. So you have to take them a birth certificate or social security, or whatever the case may be. You have to bring something in showing that you are a citizen in order to get your driver's license. If you're getting one, say you're a diplomat from somewhere else and you're getting a driver's license, then you're not proving that, so they won't put the USA designation on there.
And there are instances where you have like HB1 work visas or something, where it's like, hey, you're not a U.S. citizen, you're not pretending to be a U.S. citizen, but it is in, the community's best interest that you have a driver's license while you're here working, and that would allow you to get a Idaho driver's license. You are not a citizen, and it makes that expressly clear, which is like, no, you're not a citizen. Yeah, you have a driver's license, but it's plain as day. Mine says U.S. citizen, yours does not. Like, we know to look for this.
Yeah, and it worked out really well because at that time I was talking to ITD, and ITD was actually changing the format on the driver's license anyway, so it didn't cost anything extra just to throw that citizenship portion on there. So it all worked out really well as far as financially as well.
Gotcha. And as far as what goes on in ITD, because I always try to work back, like, okay, and who's behind this and who's behind this? So do they have like citizenship verification mechanisms in place? Like, say I show up with a birth certificate, like, this is my birth certificate, I'm Matt. The birth certificate does not have my picture on it, right? Or like, how do they verify that information?
Right. And I'm not sure how they verify that information, but when you produce that, it's got to be an official one that you have to produce.
Can't be a copy.
Right. You can't use a copy. It has to be an actual official one. So I don't know how they verify all that information, but I'm sure they've got something in place for that.
Yeah. I talked to, I've obviously done a dump truck up podcast with Secretary of State Phil McGrain, who I really appreciate. And just understanding the nuances and the effort that goes into maintaining our election system. It's really great. Like, we have people working really, really hard to make sure that this stuff gets locked down, and they take it very seriously, which is something I'm very proud of, knowing everything that goes into it in Idaho.
Yeah. And I've worked really close with McGrain's office on a lot of different legislation. This year we're doing a couple more things. It's going to have to do with, there's a couple of different things. First off, I've been working with the county clerks because they want to make some of the changes to dates and deadlines, because there's a really tight window from when you withdraw from an election till they have to get the ballots ready to go out to the military and whatnot. So there's that tight. So we're moving some things around a little bit there. But on that, we're also this year we had, like, Nez Perce County actually started their early voting on the 7th. Ada County started on the 15th. Everybody else started on the 21st. And so when we're looking at the law, it says you can start on or before the third Monday before the election, right? And so we're changing that. So now we're going to have everybody dialed into where they're all going to start at the same time if they're going to run it. But we're not forcing them to run early voting, because there's some counties that don't want to do early voting. So it's going to just kind of tie it all down and bring that into alignment across the state. The other one that I'm working with the Secretary of State's office on is actually more on the data style. So we're going to be able to see when someone changed the driver's license from Idaho to Wyoming.
Gotcha.
And so we're going to lock some of that stuff down. And on that same aspect, we're also working on, there's been a problem, and we all kind of seen it with Harris and Biden. Biden dropped out. Harris stepped in with no votes. What we're doing on one of the bills is we're actually going to put in place where if you make it through the primary election, then you're into the election for the general election, unless you die or there's some reason that you can't run that election. But it has to be a real reason why you can't, so that you're not putting placeholders in just to make it through the primary and then changing it out at the end, because Representative Horman had that happen to her.
Wait, what specifically happened?
So she had a candidate that was against her in the primary. Once they got through the primary, they pulled that candidate out, put someone else in that was a stronger candidate to be able to try and win. Representative McCann had the same thing happen, because she had and that was up in my district. She had a in my opinion, a pretty weak candidate. Well, he dropped out, and then they put someone else in. And so when you're seeing that game being played, I don't think that game should be played on either side. So if you're going to run, you're going to run.
In the case of Horman, like, why run the bad candidate through the primary?
I think it's just because if you don't have anybody lined up that's going to be a solid candidate at that point, let's get through that.
You just run somebody.
That way the say the Democrat Party in this case could just put someone in and install that person instead to finish out the race in the general.
Man. So. Yeah, no.
We're locking it down.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you could help me understand if this is true or not. Okay. I was told by somebody at a convention that I was at recently that members of the Nez Perce tribe and the communities, the countries of Native Americans within Idaho, get to vote in all Idaho elections as well. Is that true, that somebody could be like, hey, I'm a citizen of the Nez Perce, country, not the United States, or they live on the reservation, they have no allegiance to the United States, but still get to vote in our, elections?
Well, I don't know I would say yes, probably. My guess is because I know the Nez Perce tribe does a lot in my election as well, because I cover the Nez Perce tribe area. I also know that the Coeur d'Alene tribe's pretty active in politics and stuff, because they want to make sure they've got a really good working relationship, because they are a sovereign nation. Yeah, they want to get a good working relationship with the elected officials that are kind of covering their area. So I think that they can.
Gotcha. Again, election integrity, a big thing in Idaho. It was a huge problem. I love hearing this story, specifically because Idaho, you're like, no government's perfect.
Right.
But Idaho has, in my view, from the limited time I've been here, it's like people really make changes. Like we identify problems and we resolve those problems as quickly as possible. And having this story of, I think you said like 4 or 5 years ago, you come in and you're like, all right, I got an Amazon box and a scuba diving card. I can vote technically, to now where it's like, no.
Right.
You can't even use a state ID from outside the state. Like we need an Idaho state driver's license. We need a federal identification with, say an electrical bill. We need these other things that are really, really specific. Man, it's awesome to see that those repairs are kind of happening.
Yeah. And we've done, I look at Idaho's election laws, and we've done a little bit here and there that's really made things good. So like last year I ran a bill to tighten down, make sure that none of our voting machines, they're never connected to the internet anyway.
Right.
But we put it in law. So now that if somewhere down the road we have someone else come in and take over for the Secretary of State's office, it's in law. So they can't connect them to the internet because that's just another access point that we try to protect.
Have you ever done the tour through Ada County elections?
I have.
Man, I took that tour too. And holy cow, going through the chain of custody of one vote, when there's like, they get them in, they sort them through that giant machine Bessie, and then it's like they have the different rooms that are siloed off, and then the one ballot tabulating room where they have all the cords coming from the ceiling. It's like, this is a stripped down computer. It only has like 3 functions, and and then they collect all that data and then go into the one room in the whole area that's connected to the internet. And any memory stick or data drive, whatever, SD card, once it goes in there, it never comes back out. It's like they get terminated in that room. So you can never have the connectivity of the internet working its way back into the reverse portions of it.
Right. Well, and I've also helped out so I live out in Latah County. I'm in Moscow. So I've actually helped out their elections on off years when I'm not running. And we did an actual count one night on election night. And I went in to help out with a hand count because they wanted to show, yes, our machines are doing it right. So we hand counted first and then we ran them through the machine. They only found 2 mistakes. And the 2 mistakes were something that the person had to actually look at it anyway, because the machine would never be able to catch it. So we've got a pretty good system here in Idaho. And so if we could put little tweaks in here and there just to kind of make things a little bit more secure, I'm game for that. But I think that our votes are pretty secure here in Idaho.
I wanted to do this experiment with County Clerk Trent Triple for Ada County. And I was like, look, Trent, can you get me, like, make them fake, print them on whatever paper you want, but get me 100 ballots, like standard Ada County ballots for a general election that have all the different 30 questions, whatever they are, and for the different precincts, different everything, different judges, different school board members, different everything.
Right.
And I was like, get me those, and I will hand tabulate all of them. Because one question that people have is like, why can't we do hand tabulation? And then some people say like, oh, like at this convention we did, or whatever it is, like we hand tabulated 40,000 votes. It only took us a couple hours. It was great. It's like, yeah. But that's with one, like if you're doing that with a hand tabulation of one question, compare that to a ballot that has 30 questions on it, right? Like once you go away from one question to 30 questions with different precincts and different questions on different ballots because of where we live, you get into an absolute train wreck. And walking through the Ada County election system and realizing like, oh, there's no way. You would need an army of people. We are overwhelmingly going to be like at scale. Human beings are going to get tired. They're going to rub their eyes. They're going to miss. I used to do SAT prep for like almost 20 years. One of the big problems that I would always talk to people about is like, listen, let's say you make 10 mistakes on this math test. You're only going to not understand 3 questions. Right. The other 7 are going to be small mistakes. I'm like, what? That's not true. I was like, you missed number 5. You literally marked A instead of B. You had the right answer. You just marked A. You knew it was B. They're like, oh, I guess it's true. Overwhelmingly, well over 50% of the mistakes are these ridiculous mistakes that have nothing to do with your comprehension of the work. So you go at scale with, let's say, 30 questions on how many ballots are there? How many people cast votes? Like 200,000. Right. So you're talking about 6 million questions that have to be organized appropriately and answered. Like, how did this person vote for this? How did this person vote for this? 6 million, you would need a gigantic army. And the number of errors you would encounter would be, an order of magnitude greater than what we deal with now.
And see, I think that's one of the things that you look at. So with Ada County's got tons of votes, more than they have in Latah County.
Sure.
Right. And so are you going to be able to get the manpower you need to actually go in and count those in the first place? So some of these times when they're using machines, as long as the machine's not connected to the internet, I'm good with it because they do so much double checking afterwards.
Right.
Latah County, as a matter of fact, got pulled this last election. I think it was this last election. Maybe it was one before, but they got pulled to be one of the ones that they went to and did an audit on, and they didn't find any problems. And so,
the Secretary of State's office audited Latah County, and they found 0 issues.
Right. And
they send out physical auditors. They send out like dudes with badges who are like, I'm here to audit your stuff. And they're like, okay, here it is. Like, they're sealed. This is like chain of custody. Everybody signed off on the sheet. Here you go. And then they go through and tabulate everything.
Yeah. And I think that there's one area that we're trying to figure out how we lock up the best, and that's when it comes to the affidavit. I still struggle with the affidavit
A little bit.
And the reason I struggle with the affidavit the most is because my wife and I, we were living, and then we moved to we were building a house. And so we moved to an apartment for a little while we get our house ready to go. And when we did that, my wife went in to vote on the primary, and she went in, they said, well, here, just fill this out. She told them I need to change my address on my registration. Well, they said, just fill this out. And it was the affidavit. Well, I went looking like a week later, and because she did early voting, and she popped up with 2 different registers. I'm going, wait a minute. So I talked to the Secretary of State. Now, they would have caught that in some of the stuff they do it later on, but it still gives me caution. So the affidavit I'm a little bit concerned about, but we'll see where we can end up on that.
Now, the affidavit is used for going in to get your actual ballot. You cannot register with an affidavit, right? Like, you can't register to vote and just sign that, like, yes, this is me. The affidavit is exclusively, because there are 2 different instances. You register to vote and you go in to vote. There is an affidavit process that is used very infrequently by people, but it is utilized in the actual voting process. But there is no analogous activity in the registration. Registration, they want hard information. They're like, I ain't taking your word for it. Like, show me that ID.
Right. But once that ballot's cast, and then they have to go in and register later or whatever, that ballot's already cast, and you're not going back to get it. So that's why we're trying to figure out what's the best alternative to that. Because, like I said, my wife went in, filled out the affidavit because that's what they handed her, and she cast her vote. And then I went and looked at it later, and this one hadn't been cast yet, but this one had.
Gotcha.
And so they would have to catch that somewhere down the line. But we got to figure out how to do that. Because there's, when I was talking a while ago to somebody else that was in the Secretary of State's office a couple of years back before Secretary McGrain was put in there, he was saying, yeah, they always fill out the affidavit just because they don't carry their driver's license with them. So they just go and fill out the affidavit and put it in, but they were already registered. So
gotcha.
Got to play that and figure out how that's going to work out the best.
And it's like 98.5% of people register and vote with an Idaho driver's license, right? Like, the affidavit does not account for like 10% of the votes in Idaho. It's like a very, very small number of people that are voting it. And, anyway, so that's a good thing to know.
What's interesting, because we got rid of the student ID to be able to register. And so what happened in our area, because I've got the University of Idaho in my district, they had students lined up at the time the polls were supposed to close. They had students lined up to get registered to vote. And it was really interesting to watch that because I'm watching my numbers and stuff, and I kind of felt good because my numbers were getting bigger. And I'm thinking students are actually registering and voting Republican. Kind of threw me off for a minute there, but I was going, I'm feeling good now. So,
yeah, there's an interesting split culturally happening on campuses. I went to Berkeley. This was even 20 years ago, 2000 to 2004, and it made me more conservative being on that campus. Like, whatever I thought about, society, like being exposed to, I'm like, oh, that's bad. Right. Doesn't take a whole lot. You're like, I can iron this bad boy out. Let's not have that. And I think it's only become exaggerated. I had a lot of students doing SAT prep. I developed a really good relationship with my students. I had classrooms, and they would text me all the time, like, hey, what do you think about this? And one of the instances when somebody texted me was I think it was something had happened and everybody was posting this blackout on their Instagram. So they just post a picture that's completely black solid bar. And this kid texted me and he said, listen, I don't know what to do. I'm like, what's going on? We're like, what? He was like, everybody's doing this and I'm getting a lot of pressure from people to follow suit. And like, I don't know that I feel good about doing so. I was like, man, listen, no matter what, do not yield to pressure. Like if you decide you want to do it, if you decide you don't want to do it, that's fine. I'm not telling you either way. Like it doesn't matter to me. But what's really important is that you don't get bullied into this. And he's like, thanks. Like I essentially just needed permission to not, and he didn't do it. And it's like, it doesn't matter to me if he did or didn't. What matters is that there is a fissure developing in our younger generations with people being like, you know what, man, I don't buy this stuff. Right. Like, I don't buy it. This is really exaggerated. I'm not in. I saw this hilarious social media clip. It was hilarious. This guy, skinny little dude, like chopping this, like with his axe. He was like, and this gal walks up there, like in the middle of some path in the forest. She's like, hey, Caucasian, middle class, white guy. And he's like, what do you want? She's like, okay, we need to talk. And he's like, why? And she's like, oh, we need to reach our younger generation. They're registering Republican at like an unprecedented rate. He's like, why do you need me? He's like, because we need you to talk to them. And he's like, fine, but I want Louis C.K. back. I want, like, I don't want to be shamed for like, and he had this whole list of grievances. He's like, I don't want you to tell me like what I can and can't laugh at anymore. She's like, oh, fine. And it was this whole list of concessions. Again, the social commentary is you've tried to browbeat this whole generation of people into acting the way you want. And they're not participating. Right. Like they're not participating. And now you're having to come to terms with them and actually connect with people and be like, hey, why aren't you doing this? Mm-hmm. Like, because before it was, I don't care why you're not doing this. You're a bad person. Well, enough people are like, fine, I'm a bad person. You know, like that doesn't work. And it's like, everyone should be heard. Right. We should understand why people feel the way they do on both sides. Why do you think it's important that, you know, we don't make jokes or we do make jokes? Like, why do you think it's relevant here? Like, let's all understand each other. We don't have to agree, but like just to shut someone down and say, hey, if you're not acting this way, I don't even care why you're doing it. It's like, that's a freeway to nowhere land, man.
Right. Yeah. We've got, as we're talking about the younger generation, it's interesting because every year that there's an election, they do a mock election in all of the high schools out in my district. And League of Women Voters puts it on, and we go in and we talk to the high school class at Moscow High, and then they do their elections and whatnot. And I've never won that election until this year. I don't know what I did to the 10th graders because the 10th graders didn't vote for me, but the rest of them did. So I was going, this is kind of funny. But
if I were in 10th grade, I saw you walking, I'd vote for you for sure. I'd be like, that's my guy. He can do a spinning roundhouse, like done and done.
So yeah. But yeah, it's interesting to see how our younger generation's coming up. We just, as a matter of fact, just yesterday we had the 4-H kids out here, and I go in and I help with them. They do a mock committee, and they bring in their own bills that they wrote, and they discuss the bill and decide which way they're going to go with it. And it was kind of interesting because the one that we ran over was the minimum wage. And listen to these kids talk about, well, minimum wage is not always a good thing if you start raising it like that. And I'm going, I'm proud of these kids.
God bless it. You know, it's so interesting. I went to, I don't go out to eat frequently. So about 6 months ago, I take the wife out to like a Zoomies or something, just like a quick lunch. And they had one of the robot delivery waiters. Oh, really? Like it's like all white with like big eyeballs on it and stuff. It comes over, but it can take trays. And I can't remember if you could order on it or it would just deliver stuff. I was like, there you go, man. You jack up the minimum wage enough, you decrease the cost of technology enough, this is what you're going to get. It's the actual minimum wage is 0, where nobody comes to work, and these robots take over. That's did anybody bring up Senator Nichols' chicken bill?
No.
I'm dying to find out how this one goes. Yeah. What's, I'm going to put you on the spot. What do you think about the chickens? Chickens preventing HOAs. Oh, little background. Classically, HOAs cannot prevent you from getting solar. They can talk to you about where it's placed. They cannot prevent you from putting flags up. They cannot prevent you from putting political signs during the right time of year. There are things they cannot prevent you from doing, and we do not allow them even with voluntary contractual obligations between people who are like, nah, you can't stop people from doing this. Senator Nichols is bringing a bill forward that says, you know what? Flags, solar, political campaigns, and 4 chickens if you live on a fifth of an acre. And her idea, I sat down and chatted with her about it. She's like, listen, man, first off, eggs are expensive. Like, we've had experiences in recent years where we've questioned our food security, and she's good with HOAs. I think the bill's written so HOAs can restrict roosters. So it's like, listen, don't get like cock-a-doodle-doo out there.
Right.
But if you want chickens, they don't restrict you on dogs. Like you can have a cat. Chickens are not that loud. I mean, I got a neighbor whose dog barks incessantly. God, that guy. My son, my 8-year-old, is really funny because what was that movie? Despicable Me.
Oh, yeah.
One of the bad guys in Despicable Me, he's like, quiet down, fish, when he's stomping on the floor. And that's what my son does. Like anytime the dog barks, he's like, quiet down, fish. But if she made out a case, I'm like, okay, yeah, this, like, we have a precedence for not allowing people to engage in restrictions. And she felt that was a piece of it. I was like, yeah, okay. Like, I don't know if it's a good or a bad idea, but it was a compelling argument, at least I thought. So nobody had any opinion about that? What do you think?
So, well, full disclosure, I just bought a house out here in an HOA.
Okay. Yeah. In Ada County?
Yeah, it's in Ada County.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we sold a business out in where we're at, and we bought this because I'm out here for 3 months.
Yeah, sure.
We'll Airbnb it when I'm not here.
Perfect.
So it works out great.
Perfect.
And it was
little
interesting.
2-bed, 1.5 bath.
Oh no, it's 4-bedroom house.
Ooh, look at you.
Oh yeah,
you dog.
Yeah. So, but it's interesting because we bought it and we closed on it in December. And we got a letter in the mail saying that we needed to paint our house. And I'm going, they just painted it before we bought it, right? So I called them and they
get the color approved.
Well, no, it wasn't
something.
that. It wasn't that. I called them and I said, so why are you saying that we need to paint this? And they said, well, it's probably an old one from a year ago. They inspected and they decided back then they're now getting the letters out. And I go, then why is my name on the letter? Right? There's something going on here. And I don't know. I can't say for sure, but I'm wondering if they were testing to see if I'd actually paint the house again. But I called them on it. I says, look at your neighborhood. I mean, our house is much, much better than half the other ones that are out here.
Like HOAs are this notorious, like you give somebody some control over their neighbors and it became this crazy thing where it's like you got the old lady or old guy or old cranky person who's just hammering on people.
Right. Yeah. And I'm a big firm believer in private property rights and letting the property owner take care of their property and do it the right way. And
you're probably not a fan of mask mandates either, were you?
Oh no.
Oh no. Oh no. Okay. So I can make that joke with you. It's just between me and you. Anybody else who's listening, it's no problem. Real fast, because I know it's a working day. You're limited on time. You and I also arrived. I found this out after I invited you on. You and I also arrived at the conclusion that, hey, if Idaho is going to have the female reproductive laws, the abortion laws we have in place, and we're going to have this as a state, then we also as a state need to step up to the plate with addressing lack of foster care, adoption agencies. We need to support more families keeping their kids, and we also need to prevent more unwanted pregnancies. If we're going to have this position, we also need to do as best as we can, providing as many opportunities for children and providing as many resources for people to not actually have unwanted pregnancies as possible. Talk to me about this.
Well, so my wife and I did a lot of foster care growing up, or coming up through our life. We, when my wife had our son, she had some issues that made it so we couldn't have any kids after that. So we got into foster care because she wanted to have kids, right? She wanted to have a big family and all that good stuff. So we were actually a therapeutic foster home in Oregon for a while, and we had some really tough cases come into our house, and we learned while we were living in Oregon that their laws are so, I guess they're more concerned about the funding than they are the kid. And that's a big concern to me. And so when I came to Idaho, Idaho's got some really good laws. But there's always things we can do better. So like the Safe Haven Act that we did just a couple of years ago, be able to put a warmer in the wall of a hospital or a fire station or something, where a mother that wants to get rid of their baby can put that baby in there, and there's an alarm that kicks off, so they know on the other side there's a baby in here. And so there's that law. We also did a law a couple of years ago that I actually was able to share one of my stories on the House floor. And it was about letting the kids stay in if they're 18 years old and they're not ready to take on the world, let them stay until they're 21. Give them those extra 2 years, which we had something happen like that where we had a young lady that was, she was one of our foster kids, and she called up after she aged out because she was in our house. They took her out, put her into a group home because she messed up at school. They says, okay, if you do this, gave her a list of things to do. If you do that, you can go back and live with them. Well, they changed their mind halfway through, even after she'd done all that. So when she aged out, she actually called and says, Mom, Dad, I want to come home. So we brought her home, and for the next 2 years, she now has served in the National Guard. She's in the National Guard. She's got her nursing degree. She actually travels all over the place doing speeches on foster care stuff. And so she's really got a good life under her. And I think she needed just a couple of years to get her feet under herself. I think that some of the things that I worry about is, have we regulated things so much? We got to protect the kids, so there's got to be some regulation. But when you look at like the LDS churches pulled out of the adoption system, the Catholic churches pulled out of the adoption system, have we over-regulated? Is that why they're pulling out? Because they were some of the best adoption agencies we had, and you'd get these kids into really good homes where they could thrive. So my big thing is, let's make sure that we're not over-regulating things, helping the families that are willing to help, because there's so many families out there that want to help. I sit on the Child Protective Committee as well, and one of the things that we heard from several families that do adoption or do foster care is that they're having a hard time dealing with the state and what the state's doing. And so I made sure I told the lady, I says, you need to take this to all the people that work for you. Let them listen to what they're saying, because you got to see what's going on so that we can fix it. So,
yeah, man, it's such a tough. You want regulation, you want appropriate regulation, you want to protect children, but then you also don't want to dissuade or deter good faith people trying to register to take care of kids. It's such a balance. And bottom line is, like, if we have more families that can take care of more kids, right? Like, first off, let's not have kids enter the foster system. If we can, because I had a director of health and welfare, Alex Adams, and I've had him several times. And he's like, listen, you have a kid with their biological family. That kid, we could provide them services or help them with, house management, anger management, career stuff, whatever it might be that would lead to that kid leaving. Mm-hmm. That's like $18 a day or something small. Like, it's a tiny investment. Now, again, I know a lot of people don't like the idea of investment in state and budgets, but juxtapose that to, if they leave that family and they have to enter the foster world, that's like $100 a day or something. Mm-hmm. And so again, you're going from, like, if we could have just kept them there $18 a day versus $100 a day, we would have been in a lot better. And that experience, that separation causes, countless problems, right? Huge damage that can't be repaired. So you have that $100. And then if you go from that $100 of like a standard foster care family to conjugate care, which is, in your more high risk cases or problems where you have a mismatch within the foster community and with the parent and the child, then you're talking like in the order of, $400, over $1,000 per day. You have all of these things coming down the pipe where it's like, okay, from a state standpoint, it's always best to help keep families with their kids. Mm-hmm. And then also, let's work on preventing people from having unwanted children, mm-hmm. right? Let's work on people managing when that happens more appropriately, like all of these different things. It's just the way he explains it and the way even you're talking about it, which is, look, this is a complex life event, mm-hmm. right? Totally. Like, we're talking kids, we're talking love, we're talking relationships, we're talking, the product thereof. All of these things come down to, look, we gotta have all of the options on the table when taking care of children and trying to keep families in line. He had articulated as well, the keeping them on until 21, beautiful example that you provided. It's like, of course, like, I was a sloppy mess at like 18. Right. At 21, I was ready to go. Like, right. I just needed a little bit more time in the incubator. But, anyway, your foster daughter, if she would like to come in and chat, I would love to hear her story if it's something that she's into, because I think there is an idea from some people that are very, very conservative, like, hey, if you're over 18, state's no longer taking care of you, we're no longer sponsoring you or helping you. And that's fine. I think in a lot of cases that's true. Mm-hmm. But, some people just need a little bit more boost. I definitely did. And it sounds like she did too.
Yeah, and they do. And, it's interesting because I think there's a lot of foster parents out there that really do care about the kid. And that's why they get into it, right? Yeah, right. The whole reason we got into it was because we cared about the kids. We had a set of kids that got brought to us. Like I said, we were a therapeutic home. So they brought a set of kids, him and his sister, and he was 4 years old. She was 5 years old. They were horrible things happened in their house with their dad and stuff. And when they brought him, he was literally laying on the floor in the fetal position. He just laid there. Now he's 4 years old. And the caseworker said, he's just going to lay there. Just make sure he's fed, make sure his diaper's changed. He doesn't know how to potty. He doesn't talk. Just make sure he's taken care of. That's what he's going to do all the time. And a couple weeks later, she called up and said, well, how are the kids doing? I said, oh, they're doing great. He's out playing with my son. And she dropped everything, came over to the house. She literally sat on our couch crying because she'd never seen him play. And she said, well, what'd you do? And I said, he's just got to trust the family. He's just got to know that he's loved. And so we wanted to adopt these kids. And this is where I really got into the foster care system, saying there's a problem in Oregon. And what that problem was when we told her they wanted to adopt, she literally looked us in the eye and said, they're not adoptable. And I said, what do you mean they're not adoptable? Because mom's rights had already been severed. She says, well, nobody wants to adopt them. And I looked at her, I said, are you sitting in the same conversation? Right? We want to adopt these kids. Yeah. And we found out later, because we were getting ready to move out of the area and move up to Portland instead of down in Eugene where we were at, that they would have lost a lot of federal funding because these kids were such a high maintenance group. And I thought, that is a dumb reason to say they're not adoptable. And about a year and a half later, we had adopted our youngest daughter. We'd adopted her, and they called us up and says, well, they're ready to be adopted now. Are you ready? And we couldn't do that with taking on this new baby that we just took on, because this baby was, she came from a mom that was doing meth, right? And so we had to break her off the meth and stuff as a baby. And she's doing amazing. She's she's almost 19 now. So we weren't able to take on these kids, but we did adopt a young little girl. So,
man, the industry around helping people, it's really, I just had Senator Robian that'll publish tomorrow. And she was explaining all of the funding mechanisms in the homeless industrial complex in San Francisco. She was there for several years. And apparently she was like, I was in a technical firm. I'm like, I don't understand what that means. Right. And she was like, we were a firm that helped agencies or nonprofits navigate the federal funding mechanism so that they could supply the homeless with the resources. So say I'm a guy who just has a bunch of sleeping bags. I'm like, I got an idea. Let me get that money from the feds and let me use that money. I'm going to buy these sleeping bags and then give these sleeping bags to this homeless person, right? Just the process of getting the sleeping bag to the homeless person requires like 5 other people in the room. Mm-hmm. And it's just this mass industry, because I got to hire you, the technical person, and then I got to hire a bunch of other people for this, blah, 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 blah. All so I can just get $100 sleeping bag to the homeless person. But it's supplying all of the people in the room with full-time salaries and benefits. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's a dark thing to consider. Yeah. But listen, Representative Mitchell, I appreciate you. We gotta call it. Please come back. I want to hear more about the bills that you're working on as they go through, because again, it sounds like you're doing a bunch of things that aren't quite finished. When do you think we're going to? You think we're going mid-April? Somebody told me end of April.
We're still shooting for the 25th of March. I don't know if we're going to hit that, but the budgets are starting to move. I sit on JFAC, so I'm seeing all the budgets and stuff, and we're starting to move there. So I think that we might be able to pull it off.
25th of March?
That's what we're shooting for.
You know what? I actually, at this point in my life, I'm more just, when the election was over last year, I was kind of bummed out. I was like, this is the craziest theater of my lifetime. And I paid for it with my tax dollars. Like, I want to see every second. Right. And now it's kind of like, I've never done this before, where, like in the last 5 weeks, I've done like 100 interviews with people, just learning things about the state. Like, it's a really grueling pace, but man, I don't want to be over so soon. Right. It's like Christmas. It only comes around once a year.
There you go.
That'd be great. So thank you for coming in, sir. Let's do it again.
Oh, absolutely. I appreciate it.